Hey quilters, it's Patti Carey of Patti's Patchwork. Thank you for joining me in the With Glowing Hearts Quilt-Along event, celebrating the 10th anniversary of Northcott's iconic Stonehenge O Canada collection. I'm so glad you're here. Over the next 10 months, we'll be working together as we piece the stunning blocks in this Quilts of Valor size quilt. And I'll be sharing with you my tips and tricks to help you accurately, efficiently, and successfully complete your quilt. Let's get started with block 1. Here's what you'll need to get started. Also need fabrics A, B, C, D, and E. In the pattern, the yardage is listed for best use of fabric, so you'll want to cut all of the pieces from these fabrics and label them as indicated. Then we'll just use the pieces that are required for block 1 and set the others aside. On block 1, we're going to start with the corner units. We draw a diagonal line from corner to corner on our E8 patches, and we make 2 at a time half square triangles. We have 2 of these units to do, so we're going to chain piece 1/4 inch down one side of the drawn line on both units. Then we're going to turn it around and chain piece down the other side. It makes it so much faster to do it this way. We then cut the units apart along that line and trim the tips if you wish. I like to trim my tips as I go. It helps reduce bulk in my block. Then I finger press my seams toward fabric D. I like to use a hair marker for my finger pressing. It's one of my favorite tools. Now I've marked the seam line on my E7 patches, and we're going to sew them to the D3 units. I've marked with a hair marker. Instead of sewing from the corner though, I am going to sew from the midpoint. I find it so much easier. When I sew this, I am sewing a thread width or needle width to the left of my marked line. This is the equivalent of sewing a scant 1/4 inch, and it makes my patch the right size when I finish this unit. I don't lose any space when I press my seam. Last unit. And now I finger press my seam toward fabric D. Look at how nice those patches are. We cut them apart and we trim 1/4 inch away from the sewn line to reduce bulk in the unit. Next, we're going to sew our half square triangle units to the E7 units. Put the E7 face down on top and keep the edges aligned at top and bottom. I like to use the tip of my hair marker as a stiletto. It helps ease in the bulk at the top end of this seam. I'm going to chain piece all 4 of these. And those units are done. I will finger press my seam toward fabric D. This may seem counterintuitive, but I'm already planning my quilting, and if I decide to quilt this by stitching in the ditch in the background, it will make the elements of my block pop. Now we sew the left half of our unit to the right half of our unit.
Align the two pieces so that they are meeting at the top and bottom edges. Make sure those seams don't flip over inadvertently. We chain piece all 4. And last unit. Once again, we're going to finger press our seams toward fabric D. And our corner units are now done. We'll move on to our side units. Again, we have 2 at a time, half square triangle units, sewing C6 to E8. We have 4 of these, so we're going to chain piece 1/4 inch down one side of our drawn line on all 4 units. Once we've sewn all 4, we flip it around and we sew 1/4 inch down the other side of that drawn line. Super quick. We cut along the line, trimming the tips if we wish, and we'll finger press toward fabric C. Lots of tips. Now it's time to build our units. We have left facing and right facing corner units on these sides. We're going to use the tip at the top of page 3. When we have a square meets triangle, they align 3/8 of an inch from the edge, and we'll see this at the bottom tip of our unit. We align the 2 square corners at the top, but at the bottom they will meet. That triangle will cross or extend 3/8 of an inch below the bottom edge of our half square triangle unit. When we align our patches in this way, we don't lose the tips of our triangles in our block. Make sure that bottom corner of C7 extends 3/8 of an inch below the bottom edge of our half square triangle unit. We do the same with the other side. This time, the triangle unit is on the bottom and the half square triangle unit is on the top, but the triangle will still extend 3/8 of an inch below the bottom edge of our half square triangle unit. The last 2 stitches of our seam are on the triangle only. And 1 more unit to go. Three-eighths of an inch. Make sure that that's how far that triangle extends. We'll finger press our seam toward fabric C. And then we add our E9 triangle. We align the 2 top edges because they're square, and the E9 triangle will cross the unit 1/4 of an inch from the right edge. This is the other diagram that's shown at the top of page 3 in that tip. When we have angle meets angle, they cross 1/4 of an inch from the right edge, and our seam line will be right in that V where those 2 triangle units cross. That will give us perfectly aligned patches. And we do the same with the other unit, the other side. This time our triangle is on the bottom and the rest of our unit is on the top, but they will still cross each other at that bottom edge on the 1/4 inch seam line. Align the 2 top edges and then make them meet a 1/4 inch from the seam line at that bottom edge. I'm going to finger press my seam towards fabric C. And trim any tips if I wish. Now it's time to add the corner units to the B1 triangle. I align the tip of my corner unit with the tip of B1. At the bottom edge, I have square meets angle, so our corner unit will extend 3/8 of an inch below the bottom edge of B1. I'm going to chain piece all 4 of these. I will finger press my seams toward fabric B. Cut the units apart, and then we'll add the other corner. At the top edge, we have angle meets angle. We know that that V will be a 1/4 inch from the right edge, and that's the correct alignment. And when we align it that way, our bottom tips of B1 meet our bottom tip of our corner unit. And 2 more units to go. I make my pieces fit. I know I won't lose my tip if I align those 2 at the top a 1/4 inch from the edge, and I make the bottom 2 points meet. Our side units are now done. We press the seam towards fabric B. And trim those tips if we wish. Look at that unit, lovely. Now this is my favorite tip. I'm going to sew the second column to the first column. So I take the second unit in row 1 and I sew it to the first unit in row 1. Then without cutting my thread, I sew the second unit in row 2 to the first unit in row 2, making those patches meet bottom edges so that my block is square. Without cutting my thread, I am going to sew the third unit in row and second unit in row 3 to the first unit in row 3. Keep those patches aligned. So my block is mostly together at this point. I'm going to finger press my seam towards fabric A and then the corner units towards the corners. Now it's time to add the third column. I add the third unit in row 1 to the second unit in row 1. Without cutting my thread, I am now going to add the third unit in row 2 to the second unit in row 2. This makes it so much faster and easier to assemble my blocks. Now I add the third unit in row 3 to the second unit in row 3. This has been a real game changer for me. Our block is virtually assembled at this point. Because we've pressed the seams in that direction, I now can spin my seams at the corners. I have 2 seams to go, sewing the first row to the second row. I make those seams nest where the fabric A piece meets the corner units. I can feel if they're nested or not just by pressing on them with my finger. And I make sure that that bottom edge, those 2 pieces are aligned at the bottom edge. We're almost done. 1 more seam to go. Sewing the third row to the second row. Nest those seams there. You can feel if they're nested. And keep the patches aligned at top and bottom edges of our seam. I'm going to finger press my A toward the top and bottom and finger press the corner seams toward the center. What this enables me to do is to spin my seams, and there's a tip at the top of page 4 for that. I break my chain and then I undo the stitches in the seam allowance only on those 2 vertical seams. This releases the seam and it enables me to spin it, smooshing it, as Eleanor Burns would say, so that all the seams rotate in one direction. I do this on all 4 corner meets A seams. Some of them will go in one direction and some will go in the opposite direction. And there you have it.
And here you have your first block. Make sure to head on over to the Northcott Instagram page and enter in their first block giveaway, open to Canadian and US residents. If you haven't already done so, please also pop onto my website, pattispatchwork.com, to sign up for the With Glowing Hearts Quilt-Along newsletter. It will be arriving each month in your inbox, and I'll be sharing extra tips and tricks in it. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you back here next month for Block 2.